Okay, next we have a doozy of a property or set of properties for the children flex items. Now, this one's a little bit tricky, so I'm going to do my absolute best, don't need these in my ears, to make sure that you understand the basics of this. I'll show you how it works. We'll play around, but I'm going to encourage you to play around with it and see what happens. So I'm going to explain to you the theory about what's going on, but you getting your hands dirty, that's what's really going to make a difference. So first we got flex grow. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying there are 3 properties that are basically they all go together. They're a trio. They're triplets, okay? They were birthed at the same time. This is getting very weird. There are 3 properties that all go hand in hand in hand. It has 3 hands. Okay, I don't know how to explain this without making it weird. Triplets with 3 hands: flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. That's the longhand for what ultimately is just flex. That's the shorthand, and it breaks out into 3 properties: flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. You can't just do one and escape the others. They're all there, okay? Excuse me. So flex grow. Flex grow is a property that controls how much an item should grow relative to the other items in the container. The items that have a higher value for this property, so you can set values like numeric values like 0, 1, 2, and 3, and so on. So items with a higher value will take up more space than the items with a lower value. And it's important to know that items with more content will actually take up proportionally more space than items with less content. So Flexbox takes a look at what is in this container. So what is in this item rather? So by item, I literally mean, let's say you have a div and then you have content, like a paragraph of content in that div. And then you have another div with like 1 word in it. Flexbox can actually see that there's a lot of content in one and less content in the other. So that's going to affect Flexbox as well, because the whole point of Flexbox is to create flexible box layouts. And in those boxes, there's content that forces the box to be bigger or smaller. So flex grow is basically just saying, we want this box that we are assigning a flex grow value to take up this much space or a little bit more space, or we don't even want to set a value for the space. For example, if all the items have the same amount of content and a flex grow value of 1, then they will all be equal in size within the container. And if the boxes have a variable amount of content and a flex grow value of 1, the available space will be distributed proportionally to each of them. So you have 3 boxes, 2 boxes with a word and 1 box with a whole paragraph. The box with the whole paragraph, that's going to need proportionally more space. So they all have a value of 1. For the most part, Flexbox is going to have all of those boxes equally take up the space. Now, they might not be exactly the same size, but they'll fill up the space and give it proportional amount. Now, if they have the same amount of content inside the items, then those boxes are going to be the same size. But it gets trickier. If one of the items has a flex grow value of 2, while all other items have a value of 1, then the item with a value of 2 will attempt to take up twice as much space as the other children. But it's not necessarily exactly twice as much space, because depending on if there's content in one box or less content here or more content here, and you have a value of 2, it's not always just going to be this box is exactly twice the size as this box. Because when you're building for the web, everything's not just perfect squares that you can organize using Flexbox. You have variable size items with different amounts of content, and then the default value for FlexGrow is 0. Which means there's no space that we need to take up other than just whatever the content is. So if the content's there in the box, just let it be whatever it is. So we're basically just unsetting FlexGrow. When you set it to 1, it just says take up 1 unit of the available space in the Flexbox. Got it? Kind of? Perfect. Clear as mud. I just got to get the theory out of the way first, okay? Flex shrink is the second value. And the shrink property controls how much an item can shrink to make room for other items in a flex container. The default value is 1, which means that the item will shrink by 1 full unit of available space. And you can change this value to make the item shrink more or less, depending on your needs. Adding flex shrink 2, it will try and reduce itself even more than if it was flex shrink 1. And if it was flex shrink 0, then I'm pretty sure it just makes it so that it doesn't shrink at all. We'll test it out though. Now, the third property in the trio here is flex basis. Now, the flex basis property sets the initial size of a flex item. You can set the value to be a measurement, like a unit, like 20 pixels, or a keyword like fill or content. And depending on the value, the item's default size will change. So whatever's inside of that box, if there's a lot of content or less content, the default, the default size will actually change. The default value of flex basis is auto. So it kind of is just trying to distribute, like automatically calculate how much space you need to calculate, in this Flexbox. Okay, so there's an article on CSS tricks, which I love, by the way. If you're not familiar with CSS tricks, just basically make it your home website. And it's helping you to understand flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis because it's a bit of a tricky one. You think you got it and then you don't, and then you wonder what happened. So this article helps. There's another article that I'm going to link up by CSS Tricks as well. So the way that Robin Rendell explained each of those properties, he says flex grow is the maximum amount of space I want it to take up proportionally. Flex shrink is the minimum amount of space I want this item to be. And the flex basis is the ideal size that you want it to be. Hopefully that helps. I'll link it up. You can read through. He does a really good job of explaining it. Now, those are the three properties. They actually complicate it a little bit more by creating a shorthand. So this goes into a shorthand, which is probably what you're going to want to use, called flex. And its syntax is flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis. So there's three values you put in the flex property. And the default values are flex 0, 1, auto, which means flex grow 0, flex shrink 1, flex basis auto. Flex grow 0 just means don't even look at this. We're not even going to set a maximum amount of space we want to take up. Flex shrink 1 means allow this box to shrink to make space for other boxes that need room. How kind and charitable of flex shrink, right? Flex basis auto just means automatically calculate its ideal size. But you could set flex basis to like 100 pixels and you'll say, my ideal size for this box is 100 pixels. But depending on its flex grow and flex shrink, you can move it around. Okay, so let's actually try this out. I'm going to open up a code pen here. I've set up a couple divs here, boxes, and I've got the first one with varying amounts of content and the second set of boxes with just the same amount of content, because I want to show you how the same values can affect the boxes, just to show you that like the amount of content actually affects this a lot. I got both boxes and boxes 2, which are first grade container and the second grade container. Both are set to display flex and flex flow row, no wrap. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to turn it all off. So right now we have flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis. I'm not setting it, but here's the thing. Just because I didn't set it doesn't mean that it's not actually already there. You saw that I commented that out and nothing happened to the layouts here. That's because these are already applied. So Flexbox automatically applies a bunch of flex properties and values all over the place as soon as you turn on Flexbox. So if I turned off Flexbox by just commenting out display flex on each of these boxes, it's going to behave like a normal block style layout as we would expect. Just blocks of content. And as soon as I turned on flex, the child items fall in line and then create a Flexbox layout. The reason why is because one of the properties, or one of the series of properties, flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis, are automatically applied. So when I uncomment this, flex grow, flex shrink, flex basis, nothing happens because those are already applied. So Flexbox just takes the liberty to add CSS for us, which can be really frustrating. If you don't know that, you're wondering, why is this doing this? It's because Flexbox is already doing it for you. This is kind of redundant. Putting this here doesn't matter because it doesn't do anything. But this is where knowledge is power, right? Knowing this is going to help us because now we can individually change these things. So I'm selecting the class of box, which is all of these boxes in both of these sections. So they're all set to this, which they already were. If I set flex grow to 1, watch what happens to all of them, okay? Nothing happened to the first one because it's already filling out the space because the content is making the boxes stretch out. And the bottom one, where there was a little bit of content, the boxes didn't need to fill out the full box, the full space. But as soon as I put on flex grow to 1, we want these to fill up an available unit of space to fill the container. And so then the bottom one actually changed. The top one didn't change because it already filled the container out. What if we tried changing another value? So let's try flex shrink 0. Let's see what happens. Okay, so flex shrink 0 means don't let this box shrink. I don't want it to shrink. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. It's not shrinking the box to fit within the container. So it's a full line of content. The bottom boxes are fine because there's not a lot of content. The boxes fill out the space. It's not making Flexbox distribute space. But the first one, there's a lot of content, especially in box number 4. So it's stretching that box out really far past its container. Now, if I were to change the value of boxes flex flow to row wrap, because right now it's row no wrap, it's not letting the Flexbox layout wrap, which is what it wants to do if you set it to wrap. And it will go like this, which looks much better. So now what it's doing is it's making the boxes fill out the space that it has, and that box number 4 with the obnoxious amount of content, it realizes I can't fit on this line anymore. And because I am permitted to wrap, I'm going to go down a line and fill out the available space. Okay, so let's leave it on flex flow row wrap for now on the first boxes here. And let's change flex shrink to 1 back to its default. Nothing's happening. Flex grow to 0. So by default, this is the layout for a flex flow row wrap when the flex, grow, shrink, and basics values are set to the default. So right now it is wrapping down that 4th box on the first section because the content is too big to fit on this line, but it's not filling out the space. If I say flex grow 1, you'll see it fills it out like it did. Okay, go back to default. Now I want to show you flex basis. Right now it's auto. If I set it to 100 pixels, what it's going to do, it's going to make all the boxes the ideal size of 100 pixels. What if I set flex grow to 1? Okay. Do you see how these are no longer 100 pixels wide? They're not. If I take that off, that's 100 pixels. Each box is 100 pixels wide. That's not 100 pixels. That's because I am allowing the flex items to grow. I've set flex grow to 1. Now, I'm applying this to all of them. If I were to change this to flex grow 2, I don't really think it would do anything because it's setting it to all of the boxes. They've already filled the space out. You can't make all the boxes take up twice the amount of available space because there is no more space available. If you were setting this on an individual item, you can make that one take up twice the amount of available space. Okay, let's go back to 0, 1, and 100 pixels. You can also set a value like content, fills out the space. The flex basis is whatever the amount of content is in that box, that's the ideal space. So there we go. Let's go back to auto and let's change the boxes to row and no wrap again. Back to that. Very good. We've played around when we've set all of the boxes to different values of flex, grow, shrink, and basis. This is where things can get a bit more interesting. When we set let's go to box nth child 3. So the third item in each of these flex containers, I'm going to set flex 4. So what's happening is the third box is taking up 4 times the amount of available space than the others. Now, it doesn't mean 4 times the size as the others, because if you look at box number 3, it's not 4 times the size. It's like 15 times the size as the other boxes. It's distributing 4 units of available space, and those units can vary. Like if I were to change, let's go up to boxes 2 and I change this to row wrap. Let's see what happens. I don't know if anything will happen. Nothing. Okay. Let's see if we made the flex grow of all of them 1. Okay. So now all of the boxes have a flex grow of 1, which means we want to take up 1 unit of available space. Whereas when it was 0, it's taking up nothing. It's just the minimum amount of space so that the content can at least appear in the box. But now when they all have flex grow 1, but then box number 3 has flex 4, it's taking up roughly 4 times 4 units of available space. So it almost 1, 2, so it's more like 3 times the size of a box here. But as you can tell, it's not about the width of the other boxes. It's just about the units of available space proportional to the flex container and the content in each of the boxes. As you can see in the first flex container, box number 4 is taking up more space than all the other boxes. A lot more space. Box number 2 is actually taking up more space than box number 1, which is taking up more space than box number 3, respectively, because they all have different amounts of content. Now, if I were to set a flex basis for all of them to be, let's go back to 100 pixels with this value, look at what happens. They all have an ideal flex basis, so the ideal size of 100 pixels, meaning like basically here's the minimum size that I kind of want this to be, ideally. These aren't 100 pixels, they're actually more because we're filling the container. But box number 3 is taking up more space than all the other ones. Now let's go back to auto. Now you might look here and go, okay, wait, flex 4, what does that mean? That's the flex grow value. You could also just go flex auto. Flex auto is actually flex 1 auto. Going back to the CSS Almanac and CSS tricks, you can see that the syntax for a flex item using the flex shorthand, so flex 100 is actually the same as flex grow 1, flex basis 100. And it leaves the flex shrink property alone, which would be flex shrink inherit, which defaults to 1. So it is actually setting flex shrink to inherit, would actually just would be whatever it was set to before. And here we go. Here's a scoop on the value map. So this is what it would be if you put in the different values in the shorthand. Flex none just makes it none. If you put 1 value, it's flex grow. If you do flex and then like 100 pixels, it's actually going to be flex basis. 2 values, so like 1 and 100 pixels, that's going to be flex grow and flex basis. 2 values would be flex grow, flex shrink. So that could be like flex 1, 2, and it's going to convert it to flex grow 1, flex shrink 2. And then 3 values is the standard 3 value syntax. And you can also do flex inherit to inherit the values from wherever it was set prior to. I'll link this up as well so you can go through. So that is helpful. Okay, so let's say that we wanted our 4th box to take up, so flex 2, that's flex grow 2. So we wanted to take up 2 units more space if possible. This one doesn't seem to be the case. Let's try 3 and then 4. Isn't that interesting how that works? So the 4th box, 1, 2, 3, 4, I have flex 4. So flex grow set to 4, but box 2 is taking up more space because it has a value of flex 1. It's interesting. If I set that to 0, then box 4 will actually take up more space. Wow. This is why it's very important to just play around with Flexbox and see what happens. If I change this to like flex 6, and now there's not that many available units of space. So flex 6 doesn't matter because I think there's only 4 units of available space here because there's 4 items. Well, you could see that the flex property, flex basis, so flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis are all actually quite interesting and a little bit confusing. But the more you play around with it and the more you play with the variations, it will help you to understand how you can use this in context. When really you're going to be using this, you're setting up a navigation menu in the header with a logo, centered align menu, and a right-hand hamburger icon to open up a mobile menu. It's going to be something like that. And you're going to be using flex grow and shrink and basis to give them their space proportionally to its content and how you want it to be seen on the screen. If you have like a main content and a sidebar, you want the main content to be bigger than the sidebar, and then you want that to change depending on the screen size. You can do that with flex grow, shrink, and basis, or the shorthand flex. I have the link here for this Flexbox code pen that I've set up for you to play around with, and I'm going to link up those articles as well. Those will help you to understand the Flexbox flex property or flex grow shrink and basis a little bit more. Any questions, just put them in the discussion section and we'll see you in the next one.